Hello there and welcome to our look ahead to what the papers will be bringing us tomorrow. With me are Laura Perrins, co-editor of the politics website Conservative Woman, and Joe Watts, political editor at The Independent. Let's have a look at some of the front pages now. I'm going to start with the Eye. Its headline says the country is stunned after Theresa May calls a snap election in 7 weeks. The Daily Mail says she's called the bluff of what it describes as the game-playing Remoaners. Their headline, Crush the Saboteurs. The Metro says the Prime Minister is seeking to strengthen her hand in leading Britain out of the EU. While the Daily Mirror has a play on words on Margaret Thatcher's famous quote with their headline, The Lady is for U-turning. The FT leads with the economic implications of the upcoming vote and reports a rise in the value of the pound after today's announcement. While the Times speculates that Theresa May is on course to win a majority of more than 100 in the June election. The Guardian criticises the announcement, saying it came despite the Prime Minister's previous promises not to go to the country before 2020. And finally, The Telegraph has an exclusive article by the Prime Minister in which she says a snap election is the only way to ensure Brexit success. We're going to start with the Eye. Stunned Britain heads to the polls. We had Brenda from Bristol in a lot of our reports tonight saying, oh no, not again, not another election. There's going to be a lot of fatigue out there, Laura.
Well, there might be some fatigue, but I also think that, you know, Brenda is pretty privileged to live in a country that actually has democratic elections and we get to choose our leaders here. If she doesn't like elections, she should move to North Korea, perhaps, and see how things work out there. I mean, she's given an extraordinary amount of airtime by the BBC. I can't really believe it. You know, the people will go to the polls, yes. You know, not everybody follows politics as closely as perhaps as you and I would. If you don't want to vote,
no
of course,
one does.
Yeah, well, if you don't want to vote, you don't have to vote. But, you know, you take the manifesto as a whole, you see what's in Britain's best interest, and I think, you know, a huge majority will return the Conservatives to a victory on in June the 8th.
Well, we'll see. Joe, the country is stunned. I mean, the referendum, the election in 2015, the Scots had a referendum. We've had 2 assembly elections in Northern Ireland. That's a lot.
It is, but, you know, I think it'll be interesting to look back at the 2015 election when a lot of people were saying that the candidates all look the same and they couldn't really see the difference, and look at the turnouts in this election where there are 2 really clear different characters at the top of each parties, and on top of that you've got this overarching issue that everyone has a view on, everyone was completely shocked by when the referendum came out on June 23, and everyone kind of feels like it's unfinished business and they want to have another say on it. I get the feeling. You know, you've got different political parties taking different stances, the Tories going very hard for pro-Brexit, the Lib Dems on the other side making themselves the party of Remain, and you'll see everyone perhaps crossing party lines to try and stop Brexit, perhaps challenging what they thought they knew about politics. So I think there's going to be a really interesting debate, and it won't be allowed to go on for too long like the last election was. It's going to be very tight and compact in a few weeks before June the 8th. But
it will be, what, a few weeks after the local elections. Logistically, would it have been possible to have both on the same day? Could they have done that, or was that problematic?
I think they missed there was a certain deadline.
There was a deadline for that, was there?
Yeah.
Right, OK.
They missed, or they perhaps chose to miss. I mean, it will be interesting to see...
Or they chose to miss.
It'll be interesting to see at those local elections how good an indication that gives us for the next general election. And, you know, it's thought to be the case that Labour will lose tons and tons of seats in those local elections because, of course, they are focusing on Tory areas. So, you know, perhaps that didn't escape CCHQ when they thought, well, it would be nice to have a good, positive election result a few weeks before the general election.
Laura, you write for Conservative Woman, the website. The suggestion had always been that Theresa May, she's very cautious, deliberative, thinks things out before she goes, before she makes a decision. And she'd said on several occasions this was not going to happen. There was going to be no election before 2020. Knowing her, knowing the Conservatives, are you surprised by this move by her?
Well, I mean, I was surprised. I mean, I think nobody woke up this morning thinking, well, Theresa May's going to call an election on the steps of Downing Street at 11 o'clock today. You know, so obviously there was an element of surprise to it. However, I genuinely think it is the right decision, and it's in Britain's interest. And in terms of sort of imputing motive and why she called it, yes, it's true. At the beginning, she said, you know, I'm not going to go to the polls. The country needs clarity, and the country needs stability and perhaps predictability. However, I think she perhaps underestimated the amount of opposition and anti-democratic feeling coming from the Remain side, who, although they had already lost the referendum, clearly seemed to say, well, we're just going to ignore that and we're going to try and scupper this deal as much as possible, including people from her own party, who I call the rebels without a clue.
But Laura,
like,
you've just
Nicky Morgan. But just in terms of why, so you've asked the question, why? So you're allowed to change your mind.
But this is not a
politics.
soliloquy. We need Joe to come in here on this tonight.
You're allowed to change your mind in politics, Joe.
We
And
need
I
Joe
think
to come in.
no, we don't. And I think the issue is she didn't know the amount of opposition she would get from, say, the House of Lords, the rebels without a clue, the Remainiacs. So she said, now, right, let's get another clear mandate.
Laura,
and that's what we'll get.
Laura, Joe.
I love this idea that elected politicians, democratically elected politicians, can give anti-democratic feeling, despite the fact that they're doing their job as a democratically elected politician.
No,
to
but
hold the government to account.
the referendum was a clear result.
Your version of why she went for this, you know, was thoroughly on message, and she's going to be very proud of you.
You don't really
let's
know,
not
Joe,
overthink
any
it
more
too
than
much.
I really know.
No, but normally the simplest answer is the right answer, and in this case, it became clear to her that she wasn't going to get exactly what she wanted to get. She might have had to compromise a little bit, God forbid. And of course, there were those tantalising polls there saying, look, you can have this huge majority and you can do exactly what you want. It'll be closer to the royal prerogative powers that you wanted to use to trigger Article 50 in the first place. So I think what we're seeing here is that Theresa May isn't necessarily someone who will stick to that principled position all the time, but like other politicians, will be an opportunist when there's an opportunity to get political advantage.
Right, I just shushed Laura there because I wanted to go into the next paper.
Right.
The next paper, so we're leaving that one.
Okay.
The Daily Telegraph.
Ground,
May's bolt from the blue. The fact is, Laura, you said, yeah, she wants to strengthen her hand as she goes to Europe. Once she got the Article 50 legislation through Parliament, she had a mandate. She had the strength and the strong hand that she needed. She didn't need to do this.
Well, she didn't.
This is about her own party, isn't it? This is about silencing those people on her backbenches who could make this very difficult for her.
What, the rebels without a clue who want to go against what the will of the people? Yes, if she wants to have a very clear mandate and get the best deal for Britain, then she was right to go to the polls. She also she has a slim majority in Westminster. She doesn't have a very as strong majority as perhaps she would want. And what it all comes down to is, how are the negotiations going to go with Brussels? And this is the issue when it comes to what is in the national interest. And when it comes to negotiations, appearance is everything. So the stronger she looks when going into negotiations, the better it is for everybody else, the better it is for all the ordinary working families out there in Britain. Because, from small negotiations to really big deals, if the opposition, if the other side know that you are coming from a position of strength, then you yourself are going to get a much better deal. And I think she does need that mandate. She needs to go into Brussels saying, my entire country is behind me, and don't mess around with me, because I'm going to get the best deal I can.
I think it could work both ways for her. Look, she doesn't have a big majority in the House of Commons, and if she gets a bigger majority, that will make it easier for her to pass legislation, theoretically. But going into the negotiations in Brussels, how strong her hand is depends on who gets elected to those seats, if she wins lots of seats in the next election. If it's 100 Laura Perrenses who get elected to those seats, 100 hard Brexiteers, then they will be able to hold her hostage in those negotiations. So I would wager that Theresa May isn't as hard a Brexiteer as some people on her benches, but if they push her to get rid of those softer edges that she wants to the Brexit deal, then she will be being held hostage by them in Brussels, and that won't strengthen her hand.
All right. The Daily Mirror, the lady is for U-turning. Theresa May, can she be trusted now? Says one thing 1 minute and says something else the next, Laura?
Are you serious? She said
I'm serious.
A while ago
I'm serious.
in an interview, then the facts changed.
Many times.
So, no, let me finish.
Before she was leader, after she went
Then the facts
down
changed,
the street.
so she changed her mind. You know, the facts changed in terms of how easy it will be to get this Brexit deal through, how difficult the House of Lords will be. So she changed her mind. I mean, she's entitled to do that. You can't sort of on the one hand say, oh well, she's not, you know, she doesn't have a personal mandate. She hasn't ever been personally elected, and then on the other hand, when she does call an election, say, oh well, she's only doing it in for her own interest.
Joe, do you trust her?
It's not really a question whether I trust her or not.
I was being flippant.
Now, look, she has definitely, I would suggest, put forward a very, very strong position for months and months and months, and has very quickly turned around on that. And she has sort of suggested today that it's a reluctant U-turn. But there's clearly an element of contingency planning to this. Aides were clearly telling journalists there's no chance this was going to happen while there were preparations going on.
You don't know that.
So. Well, yeah, I do. Those aides would have told me and would have told other journalists.
You don't know the aides knew, for sure. I mean, it might have been a very quick decision.
Well, we do know that there were preparations. No. Sorry. Look, there were preparations going on. They were making preparations in CCHQ. We know that she's had a unit in Downing Street for months, since last autumn, doing contingency planning for a potential election.
Stroking a cat.
So this idea that she suddenly went off walking in Wales and had an epiphany that she was going to have an election, it, doesn't really hold.
It's the fresh air, man. Gets to all of us.
But she is a politician, Joe. I mean, I'll accept that. So obviously, and
she went for the political advantage.
She's a very, very clever politician. No, she's a very clever politician. You know, she's not there through luck, and she's entitled to play her political hand. It's not her fault Labour are rubbish. You know, so I mean. It's not her fault that Labour.
Okay, well,
she wants to call election when Labour
let's get on to Labour.
Strong negotiations.
All right, let's get on to Labour. The Metro, the Brexit election. That is clearly, Joe, what Theresa May is saying this is all about, or primarily what it's all about. But that is not what Labour want. They want to talk about other stuff because, you know, as Laura's indicated, they are a bit all over the shop when it comes to their position on Brexit, aren't they?
Yeah, so that goes back to Laura's point about Labour being in a spot of trouble generally, and Brexit is a key point on that, because Jeremy Corbyn, throughout the referendum, was a kind of silent Brexiteer in many ways, or at least he was seen as that by a lot of people in his party. They wanted him to give full-throated support to the Remain campaign, and he could never quite bring himself to do it. So now they're in a position where they're saying they're not going to stop Brexit, but they will hold the government to account for Brexit. It's not really clear exactly which side they come down on, and Emily Thornberry said tonight that they haven't quite picked a side on Brexit yet. So, you know, they're still kind of all over the place depending on who you speak to. And if you look at the other parties, you've got the Lib Dems there, very pro-Remain. They beat Zach Goldsmith in Richmond already. They think they can do it again in other seats. They think they can do it to Labour in other seats as well. And you've got the Tories who, you know, are very clearly taking this much harder line. Yeah,
I mean, part of the reason that we're in this situation with Brexit anyway is because of UKIP. Not just their campaigning, but also the threat that they pose to the Conservative Party. Laura, do you see UKIP as any real threat now?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I just think that the party isn't strong enough, and you know, Farage was such a big part of the UKIP brand. Without him now, I think they will struggle, especially as the referendum, or as Brexit has been secured in terms of leaving the EU. How it will look, of course, is all to play for, and the reason for the election in the first place. And I think Theresa May will be campaigning hard to win a lot of those UKIP votes back. I believe I may well have voted UKIP in the last election. So it's you know, it's certainly, but I'm wearing blue tonight. So I did indeed do a U-turn, perhaps you can say. So you know, there's a lot to play for Theresa May, and I know the polls are saying she's way out ahead, but I think you should always treat polls cautiously, and it's not a matter of winning; it's a matter of getting a big majority to move forward. But I think a lot of those UKIP votes will be up for grabs as long as she's clear on what her Brexit strategy will be.
All right, OK, Daily Express, vote for me and I'll deliver EU exit. Joe, Theresa May moved to crush opposition to Brexit once and for all. And as we were indicating a little earlier, some of that opposition is from her own backbenches.
Yeah, several papers have gone on this line of Theresa May crushing the rebels in her own party. So we've got a sort of group in the Commons, a handful, and with the small majority she has, you only need a handful to make life difficult for her. People like Nicky Morgan, people like Neil Carmichael, Dominic Grieve, former Attorney General. These are very respected people in the Tory party, and they're people that carry a lot of weight amongst the people who perhaps were Remain Tories, people who are Liberal Tories, people who don't necessarily trust Theresa May to not be controlled by that right-wing hard Brexiteer group. So she has specifically sort of pointed to them, she pointed to the Lib Dems and to Labour as well, as groups who want to scupper her vision of Brexit. And she's now sort of sticking her standard down and saying, enough's enough.
Laura, would you want to see a defined explanation of what Brexit is, what it means, how it's going to affect this country in her manifesto?
I think there should be one. To a certain degree, there's only she will say we can't set out our negotiating position, in a manifesto before we head into those negotiations, and obviously there's a certain extent of that is true. But also, if she is going to the people and saying, give me a mandate for Brexit, well, you do have to at least say, as Brexit has already been secured, you do have to say, well, what exactly are we voting for?
Should she say it's a hard Brexit?
There's no such thing as a hard Brexit or a soft Brexit. That's just lingo.
Should she say that we don't want? Should she say that if we don't get the deal we want, we're going to leave the single market?
I think she should say that. And I mean, she's already said we're going to leave the single market and the customs union. I think that can definitely go into the manifesto. And I think she has to indicate that, if we don't get a deal that is in Britain's interest, then we are willing to walk away and fall back on WTO rules.
You want that in the manifesto?
Well, I think if you put.
Are you sure, Laura?
Look, I'm just interested in honest politicians. If she's going, look. She's called this election for a reason. She can't just go and sort of hedge her bets and be sort of muddled about it. Well, I'm not saying what she will do. You've asked me what she should do.
Yeah.
So this is what I think she should do, because otherwise you're just calling a general election for, well, why are you calling a general election?
Here's one for honest politicians. This is something to look out for in the election manifesto. Will she put in there the promise to make immigration fall to less than 100,000, to the tens of thousands? It's something that she has stuck to. It's something that she has said is still an ambition of her government. It's something that everyone knows is a completely discredited target. Even her own.
That was a Cameron target.
Even her own Brexiteer Tory ministers, Liam Fox, Boris Johnson, they're all against certain elements of it. They think students should be lifted out of the targets. There's a lot of division over this particular point, but she has promised to do it up to this point. Now, if that is not in there, I would direct every Brexit voting member of the public to say,
and that includes you, Laura.
That includes you, Laura.
No,
I would say, well, hang on a minute. Isn't this the government ditching a key
policy,
to make immigration fall to that level?
Now, I mean, the immigration issue, let's be very clear. Some people
Do you think
voted,
they can make it drop to less than 100,000?
No, I don't. Some people voted for Brexit for different reasons, and that much I acknowledge. So my big issue was the democratic deficit. I just don't think you should surrender that much power to Brussels. Other people, immigration was absolutely the key issue. Okay, so it was a broad coalition, as many of these issues are. She's not obliged to name figures. The main issue with the immigration thing is that the immigration numbers are now dictated by Westminster. The immigration policy is dictated by Westminster, and it's not dictated by Brussels. So she doesn't necessarily. She can get rid. In fact, this is a chance for her to get rid of that if she wants to, because she doesn't know what businesses need. She doesn't know what the NHS needs. You can read the beauty about leaving the European Union now is that you choose your own immigration policy that's in the interest of your country, not what's in the interest of Brussels. And she can put that in her manifesto.
That if she goes out and says immigration will be the same level, but we'll be deciding that it's the same level, that a lot of Brexit voting members of the public would see that as a betrayal.
All right, OK, let's move on. The Daily Mail, crush the saboteurs. We've touched on this a little bit. Joe, the bottom line is, I mean, you had some people in the Conservative Party who were trying to hold up the democratic will of the people.
The democratic will of the people. That's the most overused phrase, I think, over the last 6 months. I mean, it's a very powerful Daily Mail front page.
It is, isn't it?
They've got a great picture
Yeah.
of that death stare to those Brexit rebels. And of course, it's not just the Brexit rebels in the House of Commons. You've got the House of Lords as well, where the Tories aren't even in a majority, and that's not going to change after an election. And of course, if her majority isn't big enough after this election, if it doesn't really outstrip the 17 or so that she has now, then the Lords will still feel emboldened to, you know, add amendments to her bits of legislation, call votes on things that she doesn't want votes called on. So there is still that potential to stymie her plans even after the election.
Yeah, sure. Front page of The Sun, May's election bombshell. PM's snap poll will kill off Labour, according to The Sun. Blue murder. She'll smash rebel Tories too. I should say, actually, that this evening the Labour MP John Woodcock has said that he cannot endorse Jeremy Corbyn as the next Prime Minister. This is a Labour MP, John Woodcock. He says that, adding that there is still time for Mr Corbyn to stand down as Labour leader before the general election.
Well, there must be serious panic now in the Labour HQ. I mean, they really are all at sea. I think the Liberal Democrats stand in a much stronger position than Labour do, because they don't know what their own position is. I mean, the Sun are obviously delighted with this coming election, and hopefully it will kill off Labour and will kill off the Tory rebels. I mean, I think some of the Labour MPs are already saying that this is a vision, this is for the people, this is a choice between Theresa May's vision for the country and Jeremy Corbyn's vision for the country. I mean, I'll take that bet, because again, I think the majority of the British public would much prefer a Theresa May vision of the public of Britain, as opposed to the Corbyn vision, which would be to basically drag Britain into a socialist hellhole. And it's easy to forget how far left Jeremy Corbyn is. You know, once you swim through the Brexit quagmire, what you have is a hard left leader wanting to lead a hard left party who them, you know, Corbyn is even too left for his own party. So let's not forget, you know, what's at stake here. If Jeremy Corbyn was in charge of Britain, I mean, God knows what would happen.
All right. Interesting, just to come in on the end of that, to see that Tony Blair in a couple of papers popped up. I think he was in the Telegraph and the Times maybe gave him a shout as well, suggesting that people should cross party lines, in his words, to vote to stop a hard Brexit. So there's maybe a message there to Labour voters saying, if you actually want to stop Brexit, then maybe the Lib Dems or other parties are the place to go.
Maybe the way to go. OK, finally, the front page of the Times. May heads for election landslide. They're suggesting that it's going to be a 100-seat majority. Laura, she doesn't want to take part in debates, though. If you're that far ahead, seemingly, what's the problem?
Well, I think she's saying I'm not going to take part in debates because I'm actually going to get out there on the ground and, you know, meet the voters, meet the people whose vote I'm asking for.
That is one way of looking at it.
I'm not a big fan.
Have had their chicken sick dry clean.
I'm not a big fan.
Going to be following her.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of TV debates because it's not a presidential election. They were always far too presidential for me. It was far too US politics for me. I think it was brought in by Blair. So you don't really need to know anymore. It's completely up his street. It's very egomaniac. So if they don't have a TV debate, I mean, I think she's entitled to say no. They can empty chair if they want.
I actually personally don't like TV debates either. I think they suck the life out of the rest of the campaign, and those wonderful moments that you used to get on campaigns you didn't seem to get in the last couple of elections. But nonetheless, it does, the fact that she is not willing to do it speaks to 2 points. One, the fact that she doesn't feel, perhaps, or her team doesn't feel that she would be up to it. And secondly, that...
You got it, say it.
Yeah,
all right, OK, we'll leave it there. Laura Jo, it's been great having you in, looking at... I was going to say some of the stories, but the only story on the front of the papers tomorrow. Many, many thanks for that. Don't forget, all the front pages are online on the BBC News website, where you can read a detailed review of the papers 7 days a week, and go to iPlayer as well if you want to see a recording of all this. But from us, goodbye.